Some stories start with a whisper, others with a storm. This one began with a single, shocking moment, a moment that would send ripples through an entire town and change lives forever. It was a cold, clear morning in the small town of Willow Springs. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. At Rosie's Diner, the heart of the community, the day was starting like any other. The regulars gathered at their favorite booths. The familiar smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, and the jukebox played an old, comfortable tune. At her usual corner table sat Margaret Evans, a 78-year-old widow known for her gentle smile and kind heart. She wore her favorite blue cardigan, the one her late husband had given her on their last anniversary. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and her eyes, though tired from the years, still sparkled with an undeniable warmth. Margaret was a fixture at Rosie's. Every morning she came in for breakfast, always ordering the same thing: oatmeal with honey and a side of toast. The staff knew her by name, and the regulars greeted her with genuine affection. She was part of the fabric of this place. But on this particular morning, the peaceful routine was shattered. The diner door slammed open, and in strode Rick the Bully Carter, a man whose reputation for trouble was as big as his frame. He was broad-shouldered, with a scowl that seemed permanently etched into his face. Most folks in town learned to just avoid him, to look the other way. But Margaret, in her gentle way, simply offered him a small, welcoming smile as he passed. Rick sneered, shoving past a young waitress and making his way to the counter. He barked his order, slamming a meaty fist down on the formica. The diner fell silent. The usual morning chatter evaporated, replaced by a tense, uncomfortable hush. Everyone just stared into their coffee cups. Margaret watched him, and her heart ached. She knew Rick's story, or at least parts of it. She knew he'd lost his job at the mill, and she'd heard whispers about how he struggled with a deep, simmering anger. She held a simple belief: everyone deserved kindness, especially those who seemed to deserve it the least. When Rick's food arrived, he found fault with everything. The eggs were too runny, the coffee too cold. He started shouting at Rosie, the owner, a woman who'd poured her life into this diner. His voice boomed, and Rosie visibly flinched. The other customers just looked away, hoping the storm would pass them by. But Margaret couldn't stay silent. She slowly got to her feet, her voice gentle but firm enough to cut through the tension. "Rick, please," she said. "There's no need to be unkind. Rosie works hard, and we're all just trying to enjoy our morning." Rick's eyes narrowed into slits. He turned on Margaret, his face twisting with rage. "Mind your own business, old lady," he spat, the words dripping with venom. Margaret didn't back down. She stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "Kindness costs nothing," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. In a flash, Rick's hand shot out. The slap echoed through the diner, a sound so sharp and cruel it seemed to make the very air vibrate. Margaret stumbled back a step, her cheek flaming red, but she didn't cry out. She simply straightened her cardigan, her dignity completely unbroken. The entire diner was frozen in a moment of collective shock. No one moved, no one spoke. The jukebox had fallen silent. It felt like time itself had stopped. But outside, a sleek black car pulled silently into the parking lot car, driven by a man who was about to change everything. What happened next is the real reason this story is being told. You see, the man stepping out of that car wasn't just a stranger passing through, and his arrival was no coincidence. To understand who he was and what he was about to do, you need to know more about the kind-hearted old woman he had come to see. Because Margaret Evans was not just a sweet widow from a small town. The secret she carried was about to come to light, and for Rick the Bully, everything was about to change. Stay tuned for part 2 because you won't believe how this ends. The door to Rosie's Diner swung open, and in walked a man whose presence was quiet but commanding. He was tall, with a strong build and eyes that missed nothing. His name was Daniel Evans, and he was Margaret's only son. Daniel had just returned from deployment. He was a Navy SEAL, trained for the world's most dangerous missions. He'd seen war, loss, and the darkest sides of humanity. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him that morning. His mother, standing tall but visibly shaken, a red mark blooming on her cheek. He crossed the diner in 3 long strides, his gaze locked on Margaret. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the clatter of plates just moments before. Margaret, ever the stoic, managed a small, brave smile. I'm fine, Daniel. Just a little misunderstanding. But Daniel's eyes flicked over to Rick, who was still standing by the counter, his fists clenched, and his face twisted in a sneer. The air in the diner grew thick with tension, and every eye was on the two men. Rick scoffed, trying to regain his bravado. "What's it to you, tough guy?" he blustered, but Daniel didn't answer him. Instead, he turned his attention to Rosie, the diner's owner, his voice gentle. "Can I get some ice for my mother, please?" Rosie nodded, her hands trembling as she hurried to the kitchen, grateful for the brief escape. Daniel carefully helped Margaret to her favorite booth, his hand a steady presence on her shoulder. He knelt beside her, his trained eyes gently inspecting the bruise. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice filled with a pain that went deeper than the physical mark on her face. Margaret squeezed his hand, her touch a source of comfort. "It's not your fault, Daniel. Some people just need more kindness." But Daniel's jaw was set like stone. He stood up slowly, turning to face Rick. The entire room held its breath. Rick puffed out his chest, trying to look intimidating. "You got a problem, hero?" he taunted. Daniel's voice was eerily calm, but there was a layer of steel just beneath the surface. "You hit my mother. That's a problem." Rick laughed, but the sound was hollow, a tremor of fear running through it. "Oh yeah? What are you gonna do about it?" Daniel didn't move a muscle. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked Rick dead in the eye and said, "You're going to apologize. Right now." The diner fell into a profound silence. You could hear a pin drop. Rick looked around, searching for support, but found none. The regulars, who had been cowed just moments before, were now emboldened by Daniel's presence, glaring at him with open contempt. Even timid Rosie stood a little taller behind her counter. Rick hesitated, his bravado finally slipping away. "Or what?" he challenged, his voice cracking. Daniel's eyes never left his. "Or you'll answer to me. And trust me, you don't want that." For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed Rick might actually try to fight. But something in Daniel's gaze, something cold, unyielding, and professional made him falter. He looked away, muttering something under his breath, but Daniel wasn't finished. "You're going to apologize to my mother, to Rosie, and to everyone in this diner. Then you're going to leave. And if you ever come back here and hurt anyone again, you'll answer to me." Rick's face flushed with a mixture of anger and deep humiliation. But the fight had gone out of him completely. He mumbled an apology, barely audible. Margaret, ever gracious, simply nodded. "Thank you, Rick. I hope you find some peace." With that, Rick stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The tension in the diner broke like a wave, replaced by a flood of collective relief. Daniel sat beside his mother, his large hand covering hers. The regulars gathered around, their voices a soft murmur of comfort and support. Rosie brought the ice from Margaret's cheek, her eyes shining with unshed tears of gratitude. But beneath the relief, a deeper story was just beginning to unfold, one that would reveal the true strength of a mother's love, a son's unwavering devotion, and a community's incredible power to heal itself from the inside out. News travels fast in a small town like Willow Springs. By mid-morning, everyone knew what had happened at the diner. Our neighbors were amazing, stopping by all day with hugs, kind words, and offers of support. The local newspaper even called, wanting to do a story, but Mom, being as humble as she is, just waved them off. "It's just a little bruise," she kept saying. "No need for a big fuss." But I knew better. I saw the truth. I saw how her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. I noticed how she'd flinch at any sudden noise. The physical bruise was one thing, but the emotional pain, that was something else entirely. It ran much deeper, and it worried me. That evening, we sat together on the front porch. The sunset was incredible, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep golds. She started telling stories from when I was a kid about the years she spent raising me all on her own after Dad passed away. She talked about love, about loss, and about the quiet, immense strength it takes to just keep going, especially when it feels like the world is trying its best to break you down. And in that moment, listening to her, it hit me. My mother is, without a doubt, the bravest person I've ever known. She's weathered every storm life has thrown at her with so much grace and dignity. She never let bitterness or anger take hold of her heart. I had to ask, "Why didn't you fight back, Mom?" My voice was barely a whisper. She gave me this gentle smile, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. "Because, Daniel," she said, "fighting anger with more anger just makes the world a colder, darker place. I'd rather meet hate with kindness." It's the only real way to change someone's heart. I pulled her into a hug, my own eyes getting misty. You're the strongest person I know, I told her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The very next day, we went back to the diner. As soon as we walked in, the regulars, our family, erupted in applause. Rosie, bless her heart, brought out a huge breakfast platter for us on the house. The whole place was just buzzing with this incredible warmth, filled with laughter and so much love. It felt like coming home. But then, as we were eating, the bell over the door jingled. The diner fell silent. It was Rick. He walked in, but he looked different. Smaller, somehow defeated. He walked straight over to our table, his gaze fixed on the floor. I'm sorry, he mumbled, his voice all rough and shaky. I was angry, and I took it out on you. I lost my job, my family. I don't have anyone left. But that's no excuse for what I did. And then my mom did something that left everyone speechless. She reached out and took his hand. Thank you, Rick, she said softly. It takes a lot of courage to apologize. I forgive you. Tears started streaming down Rick's face. He just nodded and turned to leave, but I couldn't let him. Wait, I said, stopping him. Sit with us. Have some breakfast. He looked surprised, hesitating for a second, but then he nodded and slowly sat down. His hands were shaking so much he could barely hold his fork. Everyone in the diner just watched, completely amazed, as Mom and I shared our meal with him. We shared our food, we shared stories, and slowly you could almost see the walls he'd built around his heart start to crumble, piece by piece. And by the time breakfast was over, something incredible happened. Rick laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It was a sound I don't think anyone in Willow Springs had heard from him in years. Healing is never a straight line. The next week, Rick disappeared. He stopped coming to the diner, stopped answering calls. Rumors swirled, some said he'd left town, others whispered he'd fallen back into old habits. Margaret worried. She remembered the pain in Rick's eyes, the way he'd clung to her forgiveness like a lifeline. She asked Daniel to help find him. Daniel, using skills he'd honed in the Navy, tracked Rick to a rundown motel on the edge of town. He found him sitting alone, surrounded by empty bottles, his face buried in his hands. Go away, Rick muttered when Daniel knocked. But Daniel didn't leave. He sat beside Rick, silent at first. Then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. You don't have to do this alone, Rick. My mother forgave you. She believes in you. So do I. Rick shook his head. I'm not worth it. I've hurt too many people. Daniel put a hand on his shoulder. We've all made mistakes. What matters is what you do next. For a long time, Rick said nothing. Then quietly he began to talk. He spoke of his childhood, of the anger that had followed him all his life. He spoke of the loneliness, the regret, the longing for a second chance. Daniel listened, offering no judgment, only understanding. When Rick finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. Do you really think I can change? Daniel nodded. I know you can, but you have to want it. Rick wiped his eyes. I do. I don't know how. Daniel smiled. One step at a time. Start by coming back to the diner. Let people see the real you, Rick agreed, and together, they left the motel, stepping into the cool night air, a night filled with the promise of new beginnings. The next morning, Rick returned to Rosie's diner. He walked in, head held high, and took a seat at the counter. The regulars watched, some wary, others hopeful. Margaret greeted him with a warm smile. Welcome back, Rick. He nodded, his voice steady. Thank you, Margaret. For everything. Rosie poured him a cup of coffee, her hands no longer trembling. Good to see you, Rick. As the days passed, Rick became a regular at the diner, not as a bully, but as a friend. He helped Rosie with repairs, ran errands for Margaret, and even volunteered at the local food bank. The town began to see him in a new light. The man who had once been feared was now respected, even liked. Daniel watched with pride as Rick transformed. He saw the way the community rallied around him, offering support and encouragement. He saw the way Margaret's kindness had sparked a change that rippled through the entire town. One afternoon, as the sun set over Willow Springs, Daniel sat with his mother on her porch. They watched as Rick played catch with a group of neighborhood kids, his laughter ringing out across the yard. You did that, Mom, Daniel said softly. You changed his life, Margaret smiled, her eyes shining. We all did, Daniel. Sometimes all it takes is a little kindness. Daniel hugged her, his heart full. He knew that his mother's strength, her grace, had taught him more than any battlefield ever could. In the months that followed, Willow Springs became a town transformed. The story of Margaret, Daniel, and Rick spread far and wide, a ripple of hope that inspired others to choose kindness over anger and forgiveness over resentment. It became a local legend, a reminder of the power of a single compassionate act. Margaret's bruise faded, as all physical wounds do, but the lessons she taught that day remained, etched into the heart of the town. She showed everyone that true strength isn't found in clenched fists or harsh words, but in the quiet, steady power of forgiveness. She proved that kindness can break through even the hardest, most calloused hearts, and that love, when given freely and without expectation, truly has the power to change the world, one person at a time. Daniel found a profound sense of peace, knowing his mother was not only safe, but cherished by the very community he had sworn to protect. He continued to serve his country with honor, but he also found a new way to serve his hometown. He started volunteering at the diner, his steady presence a comfort to all. He began mentoring local youth, sharing his experiences and reminding them that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, not just in uniform. And what about Rick? He became a new man. He shed his old skin of bitterness and anger. Through Margaret's grace and Daniel's friendship, he found purpose. He found a community that accepted him. And for the first time in many, many years, he found hope. The diner wasn't just a place for coffee and pie anymore. It became a sanctuary of healing, a place where wounds, both seen and unseen, could finally begin to mend. The whole community rallied around Margaret, celebrating her quiet courage and boundless kindness. The local paper even ran a front-page story with a headline that made everyone smile. Widow's Grace turns bully into friend with a little help from her Navy SEAL son. The story was a testament to their small town's big heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that celebrates the best of humanity. And always remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can possibly do is to forgive. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who chooses kindness when they have every right to be angry. Because in the end, it's not the storms we face that define us, it's how we choose to weather them together. Thanks for watching.